Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our annual Business Educator Breakfast. And happy St. Patrick's Day. With a name like Coyle, I cannot let that go unrecognized. But it's really good to have you here today. And the theme of this morning's panel discussion is what kind of skills we develop throughout our working to be able to have successful careers. We have a really great panel with us today, and I'm going to introduce them. And as I introduce them, I'd like them to come up and take a seat. So first, I'm going to introduce Veronica Sanchez-Rico. Veronica is a nurse coordinator at Trinitas Medical Center. Born in Elizabeth, grew up in Union County, so she is a local girl who has made good. So Veronica, why don't you take a seat? And then I'm going to introduce Rob Leslie from Computer Solutions Unlimited. Rob is a long-term member of the Gateway Chamber. Actually is not from New Jersey. He grew up in Queens, Jamaica, Queens, but we won't hold that against him. He's been in New Jersey for a long time now, and so we can consider him one of our own. Rob? And then I want to introduce another long-term member of the Gateway Chamber, and that's Filipe Agostinho from Filipe Custom Woodwork. Filipe does construction and remodeling. He's an expert cabinet maker, has his own factory in Linden, and I have to admit has done work in my house and made even my wife happy, so does really good work. So Filipe, why don't you come up and join us? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the journey that our three panelists have taken in their careers. And Veronica, I'd like to start with you. And could you just tell the folks a little bit about your background?
Background. I was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey, when it was St. Elizabeth Hospital. I'm not going to give you a year. I grew up mostly elementary school in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I grew up in Union, moved to Cranford. From there, got married and did the whole everything after there. I did go to school. I have a bachelor's degree in visual arts. And then I had a sick family member. I went and I helped out with that, and I saw myself doing it for the rest of my life. So I went into nursing school after having 3 children, and I have been a nurse ever since.
Now, you faced some challenges growing up. You didn't start speaking English, even though you were born here, until quite late, and moved around quite a bit in different school systems. In fact, even late in high school, you were starting at a new high school, as I remember. And how hard was that?
Well, my parents divorced when I was young. My father was a truck driver. My mother was in the Air Force. So I mostly grew up with my grandmother and my great-grandmother, my great-grandmother never spoke a lick of English. So it was only Spanish in the household. And I didn't learn English until I was about 6 or 7 years old. And it was difficult because I was always the one taken out of class to go to the speech classes because my pronunciation was not very good, to say the least. So that was difficult. Then moving around, because my mother was in the Air Force, we did move around a lot. So I moved to about 3 different places in Elizabeth, ended up going to 3 different elementary schools. From there, finally moved to Union. Union, I want to say, was the longest stint. I was there from 6th grade up until junior year. And then middle of junior year, my parents moved to Cranford. So I actually ended up graduating from Cranford High School.
And Rob, so tell us a little bit about your background, how you grew up, where, and kind of how you got your start in life.
Okay, thank you, Jim. It's interesting. I usually have to ask, how much time do I have? I, as you mentioned, grew up in New York. I've always found that I like to learn things. So for me, the computer industry became a haven that it kept me out of trouble. There was always something new to learn. I've been doing this for 30 years now, and I've never, ever been bored. It's not many people that can say that, I don't think. It's always a challenge to keep me, what's the word that I want to say? I'm not a very outgoing, talkative person, as you might not believe listening to me now. But it's been a challenge for me to talk to people. So joining the chamber helped me get involved with things to get outside of being an individual. I read a lot. I studied a lot, fortunately. But I found out that it's not very many people willing to pay me for what I don't know. So I felt like I had to learn something that was worthwhile. And the computer industry gave me that opportunity. I forgot if I answer all the questions you had.
So after high school, you spent some time in the Marine Corps, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned in the Marine Corps?
Okay, that's correct. I actually started looking at how to pay for college at that point in time, and I kind of got sidetracked. You know, I started looking at the military as a way to pay for college, but once I got involved in it, I was actually headed towards a pharmaceutical type of track. But when I got into the Marine Corps, that wasn't one of the options that I had. So I began to say, okay, well, what could I do here? And I got involved in electronics, and that provided a introduction into what was the computer field, and I've been there ever since. So, I was there for 4 years. I got honorably discharged. I didn't really feel like I belonged there, honestly. So after my 4 years, I got out. But I got absolutely great training. It was, I usually describe it as the planes crash, everything is destroyed but the little black boxes. I worked on those little black boxes. So it was a very intense training. It was as much schooling as I could get in 4 years. So as far as the training, I would put it to the level of any, I didn't go to college, so I can't really compare apples to apples, but from the knowledge that I got out of that and the people that I see who are strictly going to college, I can say that they don't have the same level of knowledge from a practical working perspective as I do in this area.
Right. Now, Filipe, you did not grow up in the U.S. You came here a little bit later in life, and as I remember, you didn't speak a lick of English when you arrived, and that's kind of been the story of your life. You've had to adapt to new places a couple times. Can you talk about how you grew up?
Well, I was born in Portugal. My parents immigrated to France. I was a baby. I lived there until I was 11 years old. I did 8th grade there. My parents moved back, or actually my mom moved back to Portugal, and kind of started a farm there. And at the point, my mom had 4 kids, 4 boys. My father stayed in France for a while. When I moved back to Portugal, as many of you know, growing up in a foreign country, the kids kind of tend to learn the language of that country. So that was what happened to me. My mom would speak Portuguese to me, but I would understand, but I would answer in French. So when I moved back to Portugal, I was 11. I kind of like did not know Portuguese or did not speak Portuguese. I went to school in April, and from April to June, they put me in 1st grade. From April to June, they moved up to 3rd grade. The 2nd year that I was in school, they kept moving me up, and I graduated 8th grade in Portugal. I was about 12 years old. So my mom having 4 boys, we did not continue any other schooling there. So basically, I have 8th grade Portuguese and 8th grade in French. I started working with my mom on the farms, but my parents always told us that they want us to have a skill, to have a profession. So I kind of like joined a small shop in town, and I started learning cabinet making. So my first paycheck I got it on my 14th birthday. Working as a cabinet maker, at 17, I bought my first machine and I put it in the back of my parents' house in the building, and I started doing side jobs. I started doing things to friends and people that want me to do something, as far as cabinets and furniture and stuff. And at 18, I set up my own company. I was 18 years old. I have a couple of machines. I have my parents' building, and I started my business. I was doing very well. I had clients. I already had a couple of people working for me. And at 21, I decided that I need to go somewhere. Okay, and somewhere the first choice was to come visit United States. Of course, at the time, nobody would get into United States without a visa. So I applied to the visa to come to United States. I present all my skills, all business and all that, and I got denied. Okay, so I got to go somewhere. Somewhere ended up being Canada. So I got my ticket. I called a friend of mine in Canada, and I went to Canada. I was there, and it was cold, February, very cold. I forgot already what cold was, because France is also very cold in the winter. And I was with a friend of mine that I grew up in France with. So he was working there with somebody that he was basically a French Canadian. And he asked me what I do. I said, okay, I'm a cabinet maker. I do furniture and stuff. So he goes to me, okay, you're going to make me my dining room table and chairs. I said, all right, no problem. I'm here for a month, so I have no problem with that. So in a couple of weeks, I made him his dining room table and chairs. And he wanted me to stay. I said, no, I'm going back. At the meantime, I called my uncle here. I say, I'm in Canada. And he says, well, you got to come over. I ended up coming to the United States. And from there, I was here for about 2 years working and as a cabinet maker until basically I legalized myself in a working contract. And as soon as I was legal, I formed my company in 1988, and it's been I've been working since then. I do furniture. I own a factory with a showroom. We do total remodel for homes. We do architecture, woodwork. We do commercial, a lot of commercial, and that's about it.
Yeah, in fact, I can say the way that I got to know Filipe was that I was in a restaurant in Elizabeth called Valencia, and it has just absolutely beautiful woodwork. And so I said to the owner, who did the woodwork? And he said, this guy named Filipe, and he gave me Filipe's contact information, and that's how I found him to come to my house and do work. So it's interesting how these little kind of chance meetings can turn into something. But Veronica, you had a lot of jobs growing up, and could you tell what you learned on those jobs that is still with you today and that you still use?
Well, let's see. In high school, I worked at a party store. Then I worked at a Burger King. Then I started working in a clothing store called Dress Barn. And there I started as an associate, worked as an assistant manager, became a manager, wanted to make me a district manager, and that's kind of when I was like, that's not really what I want to do, and I went into nursing. All this while going to school full time. Throughout this, I pretty much learned to always have respect for others. You always have to treat people with respect, dignity, no matter what walk of life. That's just my key, number one. Number two, I would basically say that no matter what you do, I know the whole theme here is education and life skills. I was brought up with the value that anyone can take anything away from you, but no one can ever take away your education. No one can ever take anything you've ever learned. Doesn't matter what you do, just be the best at whatever it is you do. And I pretty much, I try to instill those same things into my children who are now getting ready to go into college. I can't believe I'm saying that. But those are, I want to say those are my two biggest things. I'll always strive to be the best at whatever you are, and just don't stay stagnant. There's always something out there to learn.
So, Rob, I kind of hear the same thing from you, and you mentioned it a little bit, but you are in a field where overnight things can completely change. And probably there is no field that has higher rates of change than the technology field. How do you keep up? You didn't go to college. You've been working for 30 years, so obviously you're out all day working. How do you keep up on new things?
Okay, yes, I agree with you 100%. There has been no industry in the history of mankind that has changed as rapidly as the computer industry, and the rate of change is increasing. Well, I will disagree with you. I don't spend all day working. I spend the day trying to become better, trying to talk to people, trying to understand what I can do to help people in the IT-related industry. Right? As I said, I provide solutions. I'm not just going to sell you a computer. I'm going to say this is how this computer can help you. If it's something that you have that does a good job, it doesn't make sense to change it. But the nighttime I spend studying. So I've told you, and as one of the things that I've found to be extremely helpful to me is before my head hits the pillow every night, I try and learn one new thing. So I'm not trying to learn everything that there is. I'm not cramming for a test that I'll forget right afterwards. It's just one new thing. And I've always said at the end of the week, I know 7 new things. At the end of the month, I know 30 new things. At the end of the year, people are looking at me like I'm a god, like this guy knows everything, which obviously is not possible. But I do know a lot more than many people do, and it's a lot easier to handle this by just doing it one small step at a time.
Now, Filipe, in your business, what obviously you have really good technical skills. You're an excellent cabinet maker. You've got good guys working for you. But what are the skills that you have that are not technical that have made you successful?
I think that the skill that somebody in my position needs the most is social skills. You have to sell yourself. It's not sometimes only what you charge the customer, is how you present what you're going to do and how you explain, how you talk to them. Basically, you have to sell yourself, and for you to sell yourself, you have to really have a social skill to achieve that. And second, you have to know what you're going to offer, what you're going to do. You have to explain this. A lot of people I'm going to give an example. I have a lot of clients that come to us that they have a very specific thing in mind, but they don't have the experience what it's going to work, if that's going to work for them or not. So through the years where I learned how to whatever I do, it's not just go do it and leave. No, when I go do a job, I have to make sure that I finish the job, and I only get a phone call years later, or just to pass by to have a cup of coffee. I don't want to get phone calls to go repair something, or that I did something wrong, or something like that. I want to make sure that the jobs are done correctly. Also, being a cabinet maker, I learned how to design. It's very different designing something that you don't know how it's going to be built, or you know how to build something. If you know how to build something, you know how to design it. So it was very easy for me to do the sales, knowing how to build it and design it, and of course explain it to the client. And it's most of it on social skills, how to talk to people, and be honest. That's all it is.
So, Veronica, you obviously have really good social skills. We can all see that just by looking at you, by listening to you, by getting a chance to chat with you. But how important are having those skills in your job?
In my job especially, I do take care of patients. I do deal with a lot of administration. I deal with all walks of life at my hospital. I have to be able to speak to a patient and basically get their life story, especially their health history. I have to know every surgery, every medication, basically anything that they've ever had to deal with medically. I have to be able to pull that out of them. Even some of the difficult questions, some of the psychological backgrounds, which a lot of people aren't always open to telling me. Any kind of drug abuse, things like that people aren't very forthcoming with. I have to be able to pull it out and just tell them honestly, look, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you. So you do have to be able to build that rapport with people and get people to trust you, because ultimately I'm going to be taking care of this person. I do want them to have some kind of faith in me at the end of the day. I also do deal with a lot of councils at Trinitas. I am the chair of the Nurse Practice Council, which we go over policies, we go over procedures, how can we better take care of our patients, patient safety, any type of improvement that we can do for our patients. I'm on the customer service council, so it's, don't forget the simple things. Knock on the door, introduce yourself, say hello, smile to everyone. If you see someone looking lost, try and help direct them. Just the simple things. Basically bring it back to basics. So,
Rob, both Filipe and Veronica have mentioned trust, and being able to gain trust is really important in their careers. How important is that in yours? Do your customers, your clients need to trust you?
It's actually one of the absolute most important things that I can impart with anybody interested in the computer industry. The people have to trust you, right? We have the keys to your business, right? Everything that goes on, we can get access to. We can ultimately change passwords. We can get bank account information. We can do lots of extremely damaging things. And trust is, it's funny because I'm sorry to kind of become sidetracked, but as a kid, I remember always thinking about the guy with the keys, and as a young person, it pretty much was the janitor, right? Because they had keys to every office in every school building or access to whatever. And I always looked up to that person because that was a trustworthy person. People believed that that person was somebody that they could trust, and that was something important to me. Now, again, as a adult in the business industry, that's something I have to think about all the time. And it's actually something that's reminded of us often in the computer industry, because as an administrator, you have a very important job and you can get access to certain things. So it's a reminder to be, a trustworthy person.
Now, Filipe, you have a job where a lot of people depend on you, and you run crews where you depend on them. So how big of a deal is dependability? Can people just kind of show up when they want to show up? Can they leave when they want to leave? How important is it to have people that you can depend on?
Well, it's very difficult to, it's difficult and easy. The way I see things, I don't like to fire people. That's one thing. I don't. But I also, when I hire somebody, I want to make sure one of the most important things for me is you got to be punctual. You cannot hold me back. I'm not going to be waiting for you. If you show up 15, half an hour late, we out the door. You're going to lose that day. And one thing that I can say is I don't have too much of a problem with that because I have guys that have been with me since I started. So we're talking about 25 years ago. I have people that have been with me for 25 years. I have people that have been with me for 10 years. I came here this morning. I didn't even see them. They knew where the job was. They just go. And it's very important that you trust those people. Remember, I go into people's houses that they hand me the keys. They give me the code for their garages. So I got to know who I have to live at those homes. That's again, it's trust. Like Rob said, it's the trust that you have on the people that work for you. I had bad experience with some people, and I actually put them in jail. It was once I found out, but it's the people that you put in the houses that you gotta trust them 100%. So.
And Veronica, at a hospital, you're making literally life and death decisions.
Yes.
How important is dependability on the people who work there?
I think it's actually not only just dependability, but accountability. I think both play well together. I do have to depend on my nurses to take care of the 38 patients on my unit. I am a resource. I am their backup. I do every morning. I check every patient. I read their entire history. I read every order. I look at every lab. Because ultimately, they are human. Things get missed or they're busy with one thing. So I'm their backup. Did you see this? By the way, okay, let's go take care of this. So they do have to be dependable. There is a great deal of trust, especially the patients putting into their nurses. They have to trust them ultimately with their lives sometimes. But I also think that there's, like I said, the flip side is accountability. We are human. I'm not perfect. I would never claim to be. And I do miss things. I do make mistakes, not necessarily in patient care, but just in general. And, you have to be able to also at the same time take accountability for that and say, I was wrong, my mistake, I will learn from this and move on. And I think that that's actually one of those things that people respect when you can admit that you're wrong. And I do encourage people. I take that as a learning opportunity for everybody, nurses, just every individual. It's always a learning experience. But yeah, nurses, they have to be dependable. They do have to be there. They work 12-hour shifts. Imagine someone strolling in 30 minutes later. Someone's been there for 12 and a half hours already. They're exhausted. So
we've talked about trust, dependability, and likability as three key skills. Rob, I kind of want to finish our discussion by talking about mentors and, how, if mentors have been important to you, if you learn things from other people, if you've had formal relationships, or do you just see people that that you think do something really well and you try to emulate them?
It's an interesting question and kind of difficult to answer. I have not had any formal mentors. I see somebody doing something that is interesting or something that I think is valuable for me, I will definitely not hesitate to take that and own it myself. I am a big advocate of finding out people who know something better than yourself and taking advantage of that. As I'm in a position where I'm working with people and I find that they know something better than me, I will stick by their side and learn as much as I can from them. I've had the training that some people here in the chamber offer. So I've become much more of a personable person. Again, not strictly, and I am one of those people that can sit in front of a computer for 48 hours at a time. It's not a problem for me to do that. But it takes a lot more for me to remember that I have to go out and meet other people. I have to develop that trust. Like I said, people don't pay me for what I don't know, but what I do know, how can I help them? And I needed to become better at expressing that. So I got myself involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I've had some training in order to better present myself. And like I said, I take advantage of those opportunities where somebody is willing to teach me something.
And Filipe, what about you? Have there been people in your life that you have learned from and that you've tried to emulate?
Well, what I know, basically I learned it through life. There is one thing that since I'm a kid, actually there is three things that since I'm a kid I always keep in mind is number one, when an opportunity comes to you, grab it because it may not come around. Number two is don't wait for tomorrow what you can do today. And so learning doesn't take space. So you gotta try to learn as much as you can because you don't know when you're gonna need it. And if you know it, you can apply it when whatever you need to apply it. Again, my school was very limited, and it's basically a life experience. I'm always learning, and every time that I have opportunity for it, I'm a very curious guy. I always like to stick my nose sometimes, where I don't have to. But if I know that I'm going to learn something, I will. So that's how I kind of get my what I know.
And Veronica, have there been people in your life that have guided you?
Absolutely. In the nursing field, sometimes there's that stigma of, they eat their young. But I've actually had some great mentors. When I first became a nurse, I wasn't as young as some of the others. But, there were those that really took me under their wing and showed me the way. Through Trinitas, I received a scholarship through Sisters of Charity. I received my bachelor's in nursing, science in nursing. And I've been a preceptor for other nurses as well. And I basically take the stuff that I've learned, and just as these two gentlemen have said, you basically see people's strengths, and you try to learn from what those strengths are from each individual. So it's not necessarily just one mentor, but several. And it's grabbing those strengths that, and to learn how to, I can't think of the right word, I'm sorry. And learn how to basically assimilate yourself. And now I currently have my mentor. I'm finishing my master's program in nursing education. And I'm loving to learn how to teach others in a proper way. Basically teaching them not just nursing, but taking them under your wing and saying, nursing isn't just, giving medications and learning the science behind it. There's compassion, there's advocacy, there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with it. And I do have a lot of great people supporting me in that, whether formal or informal or.
So to conclude, all three of you have come from pretty challenged backgrounds. They're backgrounds that could have been a real drag on your ability to succeed. But you've all been really successful and continue to be because your careers are nowhere near over. But I also know that all three of you are married. All three of you have children. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about whether family is important to you or whether, you're only concerned about your career, about your job.
Well, from my perspective, anybody who knows me knows there's a very simple answer to that, and my family is the paramount thought of my life. It's why I do what I do for the most part. Even though I love to learn, when it comes down to why I am involved in the computer industry today as opposed to doing something else, it is that it has provided me a great opportunity to be able to give to my family certain things. And I can't think of anything else that would have been as fulfilling for me. But in spite of all the work that I do, and primarily the reason why I work so much as opposed to playing video games or as I've recently taken up golf, it's pretty much a wake up and go to sleep thinking about my family. So that's pretty simple for me.
And Filipe, I know you have two kids in high school in Elizabeth. How big of a deal is that for you?
Well, it is a big deal. They're my partners. So whatever I do with them. And, in my job, I do pretty long hours. I work Saturdays. I don't get to spend as much time as I want with them, but when I have free time, I spend it with them. So, they're in junior high school. And, I have twins, a boy and a girl. So it's pretty fun.
And Veronica, I know you made a career change for family reasons, so I think that really speaks volumes. But talk a little bit about that.
Like I said, I got into nursing basically because I had an aunt who was sick with cancer. Her daughter, I don't want to say didn't have the stomach for it, but she really just didn't have that capacity to take care of her. So I stayed in Florida with her for a few months, and I helped take care of her mother. And it was like a light bulb. I'm like, I could totally do this. So that's literally what pushed me to go into nursing. And I've been there ever since. And then, and I did it, never mind, as a second career with 3 children. So it wasn't the smoothest road to take, but definitely worthwhile. And, that's something that I want to instill in my children, that, hard work does pay off. It really does, especially I have one going into college now. And another one in high school and another one in middle school. So it's, daunting.
Well, great. So thank you, everybody. Lynn, do we have a couple minutes in case anybody has any questions? 5? Okay. Any questions from people for the panelists?
Well, I can say that I speak 4 languages. My fluent now it's English because I've been living here for 30 years. But I'm Portuguese, so I speak Portuguese. My wife is from Spain. I speak Spanish. Half of my guys are from Hispanic background. And I have French, which I grew up with. French, I need a little bit of training before I start, catching up. But you speak to me in French, I'll know exactly what you're saying. So, and I think I have 2 kids. My wife is Spanish. I'm Portuguese. We're in America. My kids understand Portuguese and Spanish. They don't speak it, and I think it's really bad. In today's world, I think that it does not necessarily needs to be Spanish, but if I was a kid, I probably would learn Chinese. But I think it's really important to have at least another language besides English.
As I said, I was one of those ESL kids that got pulled aside. Spanish has made my career launch. Working in Elizabeth, a lot of my patient population is mostly Hispanic. And that's one of the number one questions people will ask you, what other languages do you speak? And when you say Spanish, you are like that golden poster child. And like I said, I don't want to say just Spanish because any other language is beneficial. But it does allow me to make that connection with all those patients who don't speak English. I do have my English-speaking patients. I have my Creole. I have, which I've kind of picked up some terms and I'm able to kind of get a point across. But if I didn't have Spanish, I wouldn't be able to educate or be able to actually reach out to a lot of the people that I work for.
So, other questions?
Good morning. Kudos to all the students that are in the room. So with the stories that I've just listened to, what I did not hear, if you don't mind expounding just a little bit, is were there any trials and tribulations that you guys encountered during your decision to go into whatever career that you went into? As a mentor, leading a mentoring program, we put the good stories in front of our youth all the time, but give us some examples as to whether or not you faced any opposition to doing, making those career moves and staying steadfast to accomplish the goals that you've been able to do.
I want to say for me, nursing was a second career. I wanted to get it done as fast as I could. So I literally I went to school full time. So that was 3 years where I wasn't working. So it was living on one income with having 3 children and having a mortgage and having car payments and literally living off your savings just to get by until you were able to finally, benefit from the fruits of your labor. So I want to say financially that was a burden for a while.
To me, I think in the beginning, when I came to the United States, not speaking of a word of English, when I was working, when I came to the States and I started working, I worked 2 years for a company that it was all foreigners. It was Spanish, Polish, some Portuguese. And I came to realize that I was not getting nowhere. So my first goal was learn English. That was my first goal. And I had to get out of there so I could accomplish that. So I moved to a factory that there was no Spanish, there was no Portuguese, there was no Polish, there was all Americans. And there I am, not speaking a word of English. But I knew I had the knowledge of presenting me a blueprint. I can tell you right now, the first job that I did, it was a hotel, Woodwork for a hotel in Maryland. And they put a stack of blueprints this high in front of my table, and they say, okay, start working. And I didn't know English. I just went by the pictures. And at the end of the 1 month that I was there, didn't let me go because I was there in a trial for a month. And I was there, and they gave me the contract to become legal. And that was one of the first challenges when I started working in the United States. And I can tell you how I learned English. I learned English with cartoons. If you know, I mean, everybody has children. What do they do when they young? They watch TVs and watch cartoons. That's how I learned English. I would get home at 4 o'clock, turn on Bugs Bunny, and I would. That's how I learned. And I can tell you one thing that I have 3 people in my office, and every contract that gets out of the office, I have to read it. If I don't understand it, it doesn't go out. I have to understand what they say. So I think, again, learning, it doesn't take space. And I think all the youngsters, sometimes they hate to go to school. I think, if you hate to go to school, you better start liking it because that's the beginning. And that was the challenges. And that, to me, every day is a challenge. I mean, I have one theory. Never come to me with a problem. Come to me to get a solution. So if one of my guys come or call me, I have a problem, I hang up the phone on them. So they have to call me and explain to me, we have this situation, give us a solution, or either I go there or I tell them what to do to achieve that, to resolve that. So it's never a problem, there is always a solution.
Well, for me, this is actually an interesting question. I didn't have challenges in light of what I was going to do because the computer industry has pretty much been what I've been telling people has been my dream job. So I've been very fortunate with that aspect. As a young person growing up in New York City, I've had plenty of the challenges that you might expect. We grew up on welfare. I had an alcoholic father. I had a domestic violence environment, but I always kept my eyes on the prize. I knew it was going to be better for me. I knew that I was going to provide for my family in a way that wasn't provided for me. And it became very easy, like I said, one small step at a time. Every night before my head hit the pillow, I learned one new thing. And it got me to the point where I was the person people came to when they wanted a solution. And that was, like I said, I've been doing this professionally for 30 years, and that pretty much sums it up, I think.
So I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. My question is for either panelist. Do you feel that higher education is preparing our students for today's economy, or should they look to the road of entrepreneurship? Most of our kids that are coming out of higher education, their debt ratio to student loans and their ability to find jobs that are equitable are not balancing out.
If I may, I actually deal with this question fairly often as well. In particular, in the computer industry, it becomes one of those industries that everybody is aware of. They say, everybody knows about computers. You have to know computers today, right? In some form or fashion. It's pervasive in everything from our cars to microwaves and refrigerators and watches and everything that comes along. You certainly don't need to have a formal education to be involved in this industry. I don't know for sure if I would say that it's a waste of time. Certainly. I've had my brother ask me this question, younger brother, saying that very same thing. I am about to go into debt, $20,000 a year for college, which isn't a lot these days. And when I graduate, will I be able to get a job? I don't know. And I certainly don't know the answer to that. I can only say that when it comes to whatever it is that you decide to do, if you are of the entrepreneurial mindset, it's going to be helpful to you, because whether you are looking for a job or starting your own job, you're going to be in a position where you are going to have to sell yourself. And that's something that comes much easier when you have the confidence of knowing you know what you're talking about. So the education that comes from, or the confidence that you get from that education, whether it be formal or not, I think it's important.
From somebody that has 8th grade education, I'm all for higher education. As a matter of fact, my kids, by law, they have to go to college. But one thing that I see, and I go through this quite often, I have a lot of kids that I do a lot of internship for kids in college. I had hired kids from high school. And I can tell you something that one thing that bothers me is a lot of kids going out of a high school and they don't have a vision of what they want. That's a problem, because they're going to go into college for 4 years and they're going to spend the money not knowing what they're going to spend the money for. So there's two things. One, they're wasting their time, and another is they're wasting their money. A lot of kids, they get to the end of college and they make a decision at the last year or the year before. My experience that I have with the kids out of high school, and I do hire some of them, I like to teach them, okay? So when they get out of high school, their dream is to buy a car, or if they already have a car. So they want to make money. But my theory is, if you want to, when you start working, it's like going up steps. You cannot start making $15 an hour. You can't. You have to start on the bottom and go up the steps. And maybe by the fourth year of experience, you're making good money. And there are a lot of professions that you don't need higher education to make good money. I give you an example. I hired a young girl from right out of high school. She went to work for a company, a designer for kitchens, and she did very well. She came to me with 1 year of experience, and she started making $40,000 a year. At 22, she was making $100,000 a year. That's how good she was. She was a really good designer, and she was even a better salesperson than me. So we base the salaries on the experience and on the sales that they accomplish. I had internships that I come work for me on as a designers. So they come work for me, and I just recently had one that she came to me for about a year and a half. I told her, listen, you come work for us, but I can't pay you because I'm going to be spending time teaching you, not only me, the other designers. So you have to be around us. I don't ask you to do a lot of stuff, just watch us. And she would come, she would do about 10 hours a week. Until a year and a half, I gave her a computer, and I started giving assignments. And I would start teaching her, and I start paying her. So 2 years later, she went to work for an architect. What did she learn? She learned how to design a house, basically. She knew how to design spacing, which is in traffic in a house. I taught her how to design lighting, because in my field, sometimes we have to design all that stuff. What that means is, even though you're going to college, I suggest that go with a target. What do you want to do? Because as you go through college, if you start having experience, even if you do 3 hours a week, if you go Saturdays, by the time you finish college with the paper, with a degree to hang on your wall, you have the experience. and you can start making good money. Because I think the problem is a lot of kids go through college and they have no experience whatsoever in what they're going to do. So if somebody comes to me, which I interview a lot of people, that they wanted to come to me, work for me as an interior designer, they have no experience at all. And I ask them, how much you want to make? And they say, well, my teacher told me that I should make $40,000. I say, your teacher? How did she know, how you're going to make, how can I pay you $40,000 a year if, you don't have the experience? So to me is get a target, get experience. When you get out of college, you all set.
Looks like we're going to wrap it up, so I want to thank Filipe, Veronica, and Rob for participating this morning. I think they really gave us some great insight. I've had a chance to get to know all of them and really appreciate what they've achieved. So thank you again for coming this morning.